Hey guys, it's Goosebumps Completionist, and today I'm bringing you another Are You Afraid of the Dark episode review. This episode comes from Season 7. It was written by Alan Kingsberg and directed by Laurette LeBlanc. And the episode in question is The Tale of Many Faces. Now, this episode was actually the second to last episode of the entire Are You Afraid of the Dark show, at least as we knew it back in the year 2000. So, for this being one of the final episodes of the television series, I probably watched this when it came out because I can clearly remember watching revival era episodes back in the day on Nickelodeon. And rewatching this episode kind of refreshed a childhood memory of me watching this. So that was kind of weird. But I've seen this episode a few times, cognitively, in more so recent years. Especially when I got back into kids horror around 2020-ish. This was one of the later ones I had yet to watch for the first time. So I did watch this episode, I think, for the first time cognitively when I was an adult. And I've always been, kind of on the enjoyment side of this story. But this time around, I can appreciate this a whole lot more, especially given that I've seen all of Are You Afraid of the Dark as of now, at least casually. This episode has some creepy things about it, and I think this is one of the overlooked, I guess, hidden gems of the revival seasons, season 6 and 7 from this show. So if you haven't seen The Tale of Many Faces, and maybe you only remember watching the first 5 seasons of Are You Afraid of the Dark, and you've never watched the revival era season, or maybe you've never seen Are You Afraid of the Dark before, and you're kind of curious on what the show can offer, this might be a good gateway episode. And honestly, this is a good measuring stick episode for me for this show. I've said it in the past by a few things, like I think The Tale of C7 is another one for me. But this one is a bit on the higher end of that, and we'll get into that shortly. But yeah, go check this episode out if you haven't seen it before. So let's get into the plot overview without giving too much away now. So the story starts off like every other Are You Afraid of the Dark episode, where the Midnight Society gather together and they end up in the woods around a campfire, and whoever's turn it is to tell a story, they pick up the the dust that they throw onto the fire that causes it to spark up, and the story kicks on. And we pick up with a high schooler, possibly like a senior or something. This is one of the older looking protagonist you'll find in Are You Afraid of the Dark, for sure. This girl's name is Emma, and she's out with her friend Jessie, I guess doing a modeling shoot audition for this magazine called Spree. And there's this French photographer named Jacques, just taking pictures of Emma's friend Jessie, because Jessie looks, I guess, conventionally pretty. While when it's Emma's turn, Jacques is just kind of snapping away, trying to, quickly do it and then be done with it. And Emma is mildly heartbroken over what happened. And she's kind of looking around and seeing that maybe she's not pretty enough around these other girls who she thinks are way prettier than her, and they probably have a better shot at getting on this magazine. But unbeknownst to her, there's like this scout overlooking all this talent, and this woman, this pretty attractive blonde woman, she's probably in like maybe her 20s or something like that, approaches her and essentially invites her over to this house nearby known as Madame Visage's, and essentially they do auditions for plays, and the woman's kind of taken back by the beauty of this girl, Emma, and wants her to come audition and meet Madame Visage and possibly join this play troupe that they have going on. So Emma, of course, takes the deal and ends up going to the address that the girl gave her. And when she gets inside Madame Visage's, however, things end up not as expected. She encounters this person wearing a white mask in an indiscernible dress with like a number on it, and she's like, what's going on? This is weird. And the girl's like, what are you doing here? And she's like, well, I'm looking for Madame Visage. And she's like, well, you can go wait in that room and she'll meet you there. So she enters the room, and then this woman with like an ornate feathery outfit comes in and greets herself as Madame Visage, and she's, mesmerized by Emma's beauty, essentially, and tells her, like, oh, you have a great looking face. I think you would fit right in. We might want to make you the lead star here. And while Emma and Madame Visage are kind of talking about, Madame Visage's skincare and how her face looks so good, she offers a secret to Emma how this is able to be done, and it may or may not involve this powder that she hands Emma to put on for herself. And Emma puts it on and thinks that it looks really good. And Madame Visage pretty much gives her an open invitation to take some with her, use it, and then come back and let her know how the results are. Well, once Emma leaves the house, we see a cutaway of Madame Visage going into another room, and we see a girl screaming wearing one of these white masks that might imply something terrible's going on here, and we have no idea what to expect. Well, when Emma goes back to her friend Jessie at the next round of the auditions, she now has this powder, and when she put it on, the same photographer that already photographed her before notices this dramatic change and thinks that she's more beautiful and radiant and wants to take pictures of her. And this catches her friend Jessie off guard because Jessie's used to getting all the attention. So afterwards, Emma and Jessie are talking about this new powder that she got. And Emma's like, yeah, I put this new powder on that Madame Visage gave me. Maybe you should come by and get some for yourself. And Jessie's like contemplating that maybe she just might do it. She even tries to steal it from Emma, but before she could, Emma takes her stuff and heads back to Madame Visage's to let her know about the results and the happy news that she's moved forward in this contest and possibly is going to be in this magazine. Well, when she goes back to Madame Visage's, very quickly, Emma sees that something is wrong. She's greeted by more girls in white masks. And when she goes to Madame Visage's room, there's essentially a revelation made by Madame Visage saying that she has this collection of faces in this book, and that she's essentially going to take Emma's face and may or may not do so. And Emma's left in a pretty grisly situation that we get to see on screen that's kind of horrifying. And with this revelation, Emma now has to denounce her life and her identity as being, just your typical girl and whatnot, and have to essentially identify with a number and a generic dress and wear one of these white masks like all these other girls do. And all these other girls, as we see, essentially work in a sweatshop making clothes for Madame Visage, and Madame Visage may or may not now be wearing Emma's face in the place of her old one. Well, unbeknownst to Emma, her friend Jessie has listened to her advice and has come over to Madame Visage's, and then we switch POVs for a brief moment where we get to see Jessie wandering into the house, wandering around, seeing if anybody's around, and she encounters who she thinks is Emma in this this feathery dress, and she's pretty much invited to Madame Visage's room to meet her. And Jessie seems to think that Emma, this person that she thinks is Emma at least, is kind of dressing up and playing the role for this play that she may have mentioned. And when she gets in the room, she gets to observe the powder and gets to put it on, and she's seemingly locked in there as Madame Visage is just waiting for Jessie to put it on. But meanwhile, Emma kind of befriends this other girl, I think number 87, who we later find out the name is Lizzie of this girl. That Lizzie is also interested and possibly looking for a way out of this, and Emma is like breaking through to her saying, hey, look, we have names. We don't have to go by numbers. Look, we have to find a way to get out of this situation and get out of here. We have families to go back to. We have our own lives. And she breaks through to the girl enough where they venture off into a part of the house where there's like a locked cabinet, and it's thought that these books or these possible spells that could get themselves out of the situation would be in. But they find out that the cabinet is locked with a key, and it's kept by a token key holder who is essentially the right hand lady of Madame Visage, and the two girls have to find a way to get the key from her, and may or may not succeed in doing so. But this is where the climax starts to coalesce here. Jessie and Madame Visage are having an interaction where it's implied that maybe her face is about to be possibly taken as well. And also, Lizzie and Emma have gotten possibly into the cabinet and found these books. One book is called a punishment book, and the other is an unknown book with a undisclosed face inside of it. And everybody coalesces into the same room at one point, and we see Emma and Lizzie trying to break through to all these other girls to stand up against Madame Visage and in this once and for all. And Madame Visage, of course, tries to assert her dominance in front of Jessie and makes an example of a girl by putting her possibly into the punishment book via some magic that she's implied to wield. And we also get kind of like a motivation of why Madame Visage does what she does and how long she's been doing it. But in the process, the girls possibly band together and may or may not find a solution to stop Madame Visage. And then we end up seeing what happens to Visage by the end of the climax. And it might be mildly grisly, depending on your exposure. And once that event's done, we see the resolution of it all, and possibly which characters, maybe got their faces back. Even though there's a lot of open-ended things about it, the story just kind of ends there, and we see the Midnight Society close off the episode by putting out the fire and going on their merry way, like every other Are You Afraid of the Dark episode. And that's essentially what you're going to expect out of the Tale of Many Faces. So let's start off with some positives for this episode, because I have quite a few here. The first thing I can commend about this episode is that if you're a well-seasoned Are You Afraid of the Dark veteran, or you've seen all the episodes, especially the first 5 seasons, you'll notice that the revival seasons sometimes soft remake older episodes. And this episode is essentially a soft remake of The Tale of the Mystical Mirror. I think from like season 4 or 5, possibly season 3, I forget the exact one. But it had a similar concept. Even the Mystical Mirrors was really goofy in some aspects. This mimics that, and I think in the process of kind of soft remaking that, it made it a more enjoyable version of that episode. So off the bat, I dig it for that. But getting into the meat of it all with the characters and stuff, I think Emma has a likable journey throughout the story. She starts off insecure, kind of worried about being in competition with other girls. She gets this advantage and this blessing and a curse at the same time, thinking that it's going to better her advantage, but it ends up being to her own chagrin. And she has to fight for her identity that she's kind of lost in this process of trying to gain some, beauty and a shortcut. And I think it is a metaphorical story, and it's kind of commentating on, selling yourself or giving yourself away for beauty, or not reading the fine print, cautionary elements that you find in many beauty allegories out there in media. But this one was kind of fresh because of like having an outright villain with like some witchcraft abilities and stuff like that possibly going on. And I don't know, it really did work for a character like Emma to go through this story. I think Madame Visage is honestly probably one of the better Are You Afraid of the Dark villains. Yeah, I said it. Possibly top 20. I don't know about top 10. No, I don't. Yeah, I don't think it will scratch top 10, but I think she's worthy of top 20, if not that, pushing the ladder of that, maybe like 18, 19, exactly 20 range. But she's pretty intimidating. She has legitimate witchcraft powers. We see her, not necessarily doing things to people on screen all that much, even though in the climax we do see a character possibly suffer a really mean fate. I'll just leave it at that. But there's implied torture possibly going on with how she's treating these girls, even though all the implications is based on one scene and it cuts away before we get to any of it. But there's this like dark, sinister presence to her, and whenever she's on screen, there is some tension, and you don't know what she's going to do. And the plot of the story is kind of wound tight at a certain point because Emma and Lizzie are trying to find these books, but they're worried about Madame Visage catching them in the act. And since we don't know what Madame Visage is doing to these girls, it leaves a lot in the mind to make it tense. And I think for that, she serves a really good purpose in the story. And the story is also very dynamic at the same time. When it wants to be, it kind of shifts POVs to Emma's friend Jessie. And Jessie is not the greatest character ever by any means, but she is kind of the yang to Emma's yin in the story. She starts out like the pretty girl that gets all the attention, but then once Emma starts getting attention, Jessie kind of wants what Emma has. So she's kind of put in that predicament. But it was kind of nice seeing some dual perspectives going on, especially in that second half of the episode, which I thought was kind of cool. I don't know, the makeup effects, the prosthetic effects in this episode worked very well, especially for when we're talking about the people walking around with the white masks. Those are creepy, but especially the effects you see what happens to Emma's face is horrifying. And when it comes to Are You Afraid of the Dark practical effects, I expect nothing less of greatness. And this was pretty great for what it was, especially for this show's budget at season 7's time, for sure. I will say this about a certain aspect of it that I really enjoy. There's something so weird but yet thrilling about seeing like these girls work in a sweatshop. like they're essentially like work servants. It just, there's something about it that just gets to me, like on like a more cerebral level, just imagining that these girls are imprisoned to essentially just work forever as these numbers of this diabolical being who just takes over their face and identity. And it's almost depressingly sad, but it's also, like I said, it's something about it that I would not want to be in their situation. So yeah. And the fact that there's multiple victims involved and some implications of history going on with this, that does also help to the threat of Madame Visage as well. So yeah, I have some solid positives with this. Even like the atmosphere and the music of the episode. I think there are certain there's like a certain song that's played in the tense part of the scenes of the episode that you'll notice if you watch it, and I think those were really well utilized too. And the set piece of Madame Visage's house, which is majority of the episode, is kind of cool, because we get to see multiple rooms and the sweatshop and Madame Visage's bedroom, I guess. That was fun. But getting into the negatives, I say that majority, if not all, my negatives of this episode fall when we start getting into the climax territory. To me, this is where the episode kind of falls apart. And here's the thing about Are You Afraid of the Dark in a nutshell, and I think that a lot of episodes kind of suffer from this as a whole, so don't take it like I'm just coming after this episode for this. I'm not. But a lot of the times, Are You Afraid of the Dark will have a solid concept and it will have good pacing and might sometimes be taking its tedious time with building things. I think this episode in the first half is kind of tedious. It takes a while to click on, but once it clicks on, it gets good. And once we get to the climax, we find the episode rushing to just get it over with because of time constraints. And here's all the things that I get rushed through. The first thing that you'll notice is that after Emma and Lizzie come across this book, it's super easy to get the key from wherever they get the key from. It's super easy to, get it open. It's super quick and easy to figure out what exactly to do to stop Madame Visage, almost in a plot convenience type of way. But, it takes literally in the time of the episode, maybe 20 seconds. So take that for what you will. And when we get down to everybody coalescing together, like when we see Madame Visage and Jessie coalescing with all the other girls, and you see what happens with the girls and what they do to essentially try to stop Madame Visage, it brings a lot of questions out, and they're kind of plot holy. Like, you have like 90 something women said to have gone through this with Madame Visage, and they're all, nearby, or a good amount of them. Why hasn't anybody tried to do this before, especially given the parameters of what we see happen to Madame Visage and how many girls it actually took to stop her? It's just something like that just, you have to put some disbelief at the door to kind of buy into what's happening, even though it's understandable, and maybe it just took one girl to be super courageous to get it done. You know what I mean? And I'm gonna be honest, there's some dialogue in this episode that is typical Are You Afraid of the Dark, mainly from the first 5 seasons. There's a line from Jessie where we see a girl get punished by Madame Visage in a pretty dark and grisly way, and her reaction is, "This is turning out to be bad." Like, she doesn't look scared or petrified. She just says it with a straight face. I mean, there's some poor line delivery from Jessie at the same time, and I think she's kind of a negative as well. Jessie's actress isn't that good. She was probably cast because she's pretty, but that's about it. Her performance was lackluster, and even Jessie's character, I think, was super underdeveloped. But that's not really, I guess, the focal narrative they were going for, so I can be more lenient on that. But still, but yeah, you'll see that in the climax. It's just silly stuff. But how fast, like I said, how fast they come to this conclusion to defeat her, and once you see her be defeated, it is really weird. And like, what made you come to this conclusion to make this the mechanism to how she's able to get her real face back, I guess? Beyond me. It's kind of dumb, but but at least it serves to a darker fate for Madame Visage, in terms of maybe possibly death. I don't want to go any further than that, but it's just whatever. You know what I mean? I think it was done better in Mystical Mirror, actually, who has a similar ending to this episode as well. Like I said, this is kind of like a soft remake of Mystical Mirror. And going back on that, if you've seen that episode, you already know what to expect here after a certain point. The level of intrigue kind of disappears, probably about 13 minutes in. After that point, once you get to a certain point of the story, you're like, here we go. We're going down the retread again. But at least it's not as goofy as Mystical Mirror. But yeah, it's kind of there. It makes it kind of, we've been here, we've done that. It's kind of unoriginal. But then again, if I like something more than the original, I'm not going to dock it for it. But it is something to bring up. But yeah, essentially, I think the climax is really where it just kind of fizzles for me. And also, there's something about the resolution that makes absolutely zero sense. And I'm going to bring it up now before I get into my overall ranking. There's an element about these people possibly being, transported into this book, this punishment book of sorts, and we see somebody actually go in there. And once Madame Visage is possibly taken out of the picture, somebody looks at the book and notices that there's nothing in there. But we, as the audience, don't see anybody from this book reanimate into the room, and we have no idea where these people went. And it's like, okay, what happened to these people in the book? Like, did they die? Were they erased forever? Did they come back to life? Who knows? But the episode never explains that. And it's just, like I said, it's another one of those things that is rushed through because they're trying to wrap it up quickly. And that's annoying. But besides the climax being kind of a fumble and, not in the most detrimental way, because at least there's some good aspects to it. I still had a fun time with this episode. I quite enjoyed myself with this. So from a 0 to 5 star basis, honestly, those problems are more smaller to medium-ish, and they do add up. But surprisingly, they did not take it down too far, and put it into like a C tier. So we're actually dealing with like B tier stuff here. I think it's not quite A tier. You'll know me when you see my reaction of an A tier Are You Afraid of the Dark episode normally, but this one I was shockingly surprised. There was some decent quality here and some good messages and some creepy, eerie stuff going on here. So I'm willing to give this thing a B. Now, where I settled with this, with those problems, I decided to deduct 0.9 off and give this about a 4.1 out of 5 stars. It has its flaws. It's not the greatest thing ever, if I'm being honest, but where it does succeed, those things do shine pretty hard for it. And yeah, I think this is a solid Are You Afraid of the Dark episode, a very good one at that. B minus though, but maybe if I'm on a more forgiving day, I might be able to forgive some things in the future. Maybe they might get actually worse. Who knows? But as of now, I feel comfortable giving that rating to this episode here. I think it's deserved, and I think I'm being fair on that. So, yeah, that's my thoughts on the Tale of Many Faces. Let me know down in the comment section if you've seen this episode before. Do you love this? Do you hate this? I'm dying to know. And I'll see you next time.